There is a kingdom where
Hi, this is the coaching video for the on-campus small group leaders teachers for Sunday, September the 22nd. So if you are one of the leaders teachers for the on-campus small groups for this Sunday, then this is the video for you. Now, as we get started, there are going to be three things that you need. One, you're going to need about 20 minutes or so of uninterrupted time to kind of go through this video to get in preparation for this Sunday. You're also going to need the teaching transcript for September the 22nd. You should have already received that. And then you'll need something to write with. So if you don't have all three of those, why don't you hit the pause button and either get that time, find that transcript, get something to write with, and we'll get started. Now, this Sunday's lesson is actually not going to be from the Gospel of John. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be studying a text from Mark chapter 6, which is Mark's account of the story that we'll be studying from the Gospel of John during the message time. And what we're going to be doing is looking at a very familiar story. It's called the Feeding of the 5,000. We refer to that, refer to this event as that. It's a story that many of your small group members are going to be familiar with. You're going to be familiar with it. And one of the things that we have to guard against because of that is because it is such a known story, we tend to kind of read through it very quickly, kind of go over it, and not really take the time to dig into this particular story, because we said, well, I heard it in Vacation Bible School, or I learned it when I was a child in Sunday school, or I've heard it preached or taught or whatever. But I want us to kind of caution against that. I'd like for us to be able to take some time, look at it, not only in your preparation as a facilitator, as a teacher, leader, but also for your small group members, that we don't fall into the trap of thinking, because this is so familiar, there's really nothing I can learn from this. Because in this story, what we're going to be doing is we're going to kind of try to move past the what of that which takes place, and move more into the why. It's a miracle. John's gospel tells us it was a sign. In other words, there was something that God was wanting to do other than just the practical, material, physical aspects of this miracle. There was a reason that Jesus performed this miracle at this time, in this place, with this group of people. And so we want to move past the what, which we tend to get caught up a lot of times in the miracles, and look at the why. Why did Jesus choose to do this miracle at this point in time there? So keep that in mind as we look at this story today. Now, also, the message Sunday morning will be from the Gospel of John, but as I said, our lesson is going to come from the Gospel of Mark. Now, we'll be looking at the same miracle, we'll be looking at the same event, just from two different perspectives, so to speak. One from John's perspective as he records that in his gospel, and then what we'll be studying in our small groups, on-campus small groups, will be Mark's perspective of what happens in that gospel, or in that miracle, from his perspective. So even though we're looking at the same event, we're two different texts, there's still going to be overlap. There's still going to be things that bridge together from both the message and your small group time. So just keep that in mind as we prepare for this Sunday as well. Now, of course, as you get your teaching transcript in front of you, the first page is the overview, kind of gives you an overview of what we're going to be looking at, what we're going to be talking about, what we're going to be discussing this week from this lesson. And what we're going to be looking at, as I said before, is more of the why behind the miracle, more so than the what takes place. Now, the events, there are certain things in the miracle itself that happen that help us understand the why, but we're going to kind of move, not focus so much on the details of what happens as much as we do why that took place. Now, and as you look at the overview, you'll see that what we're going to be focusing in on, the kind of the big idea, the main thought for this Sunday, is the fact that what we all need is Jesus himself. And that's what he gives to us. He gives us himself. And we'll be talking about that in a few minutes. Now, on page 2, you've got your introduction. In fact, page 2 and 3 are your introduction. What I'd encourage you to do is read through that, look at that story that's there, maybe learn that story so you could kind of just tell it in your own words and use that to introduce what we're going to be talking about from the Gospel of Mark. As you get into the text itself and move to page 4, which is teaching the text, we're going to be, as I said, looking at this miracle that's called the feeding of the 5,000. And any passage that we teach, any text that you look at, you want to make sure you get the greater context, and that's so true in this particular text today. As you look there on page 4, you'll see some information that helps you there, which talks about where the disciples had been given a mission by Jesus, and they'd gone out and carried that mission out. They'd been teaching. They'd been performing miracles. They'd been casting out evil spirits. They had been interacting with people for quite a while, and the result of that was two things. One is they were very excited. They were so excited about what they'd seen happen and what God had done and the things they'd seen take place in the lives of people, and they wanted to report that back to Jesus. But the other thing that happened was they were exhausted. They were fatigued, because in ministry and doing ministry like that, interacting with people like that, it is a very tiring task. And so they had gotten fatigued, they got exhausted. And when they came back to Jesus, kind of give their report, to kind of tell about what all had happened and bring him up to speed, so to speak, Jesus, obviously being God himself, recognized that and said, hey, what I need to do is get this group of guys, I need to give them some downtime where they can get re-energized, they can get kind of rebooted for our next phase of ministry. And so he seeks to do that. Now, what happens is, obviously, at this point in Jesus' ministry, he's becoming a very recognized person because of the things he'd been teaching, the other miracle that had taken place. And so he's becoming known. And whenever he shows up, a crowd gathers around him. And that's what happened here. And so Jesus tried to take his disciples to another place so they could be alone, but it didn't work. The people kind of figured out where they were going, and so they kind of took a different route, and they beat them there, so to speak. And when Jesus' disciples arrived at this spot where they thought they would be alone with him and have some downtime, there was this whole crowd of people coming, just thousands of people we know that were coming. And as they were coming, it says that Jesus looked at them, and he saw them as a sheep without a shepherd. Now, that's a very important phrase. It's a phrase the people of that day would have understood very quickly. A sheep without a shepherd basically meant that they were a people that didn't have anyone to lead them, anyone to guide them, anyone to help them. He would have seen them as a flock of sheep that were wandering around without anyone to protect them, without anyone to provide for them, or anyone to guide them. And of course, the people of that day would have made that connection when he used that phrase, sheep without a shepherd, because that was something they were familiar with. Well, we're not so familiar with that today. Maybe here's an analogy that would help a little bit, since we're in the midst of football season and, of course, the NFL, but more importantly, college football. And so we're in the midst of college football season, and kind of think of it in this terms. Jesus, as he looked at them, he kind of saw them as a team without a coach. There was not a coach there to guide them, direct them. There was not a coach to make sure that chaos didn't erupt. And a football team without a coach, that's what happens. They become very chaos happens. They don't get prepared to play the game, and when they're playing the game, nobody's there to keep them together, pointing, moving in one direction. And that's the way Jesus saw these people. As I said, they would connect with that because that was a familiar analogy from them, not just from the life that they lived in sheep and interacting with sheep and shepherds all the time, but because of Scripture. Their thoughts would have gone back to like a passage, as is pointed out in your teaching transcript on page 5, Numbers 27, where Moses was getting ready to lead the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel was getting ready to move into the Promised Land, and God had made it clear that Moses wasn't going to be the one to lead them there. And Moses realized they needed a leader. They needed a leader to protect them, to provide for them, to guide them. And so what he did is he asked God to raise up another leader in his place, put someone else in that spot. And of course, we know that was Joshua. And in Numbers chapter 5, you're going to read about that. And then also, and that's a positive aspect of that leadership. But then in Ezekiel chapter 34, you're going to read about another time that the people were without, or they had shepherds, they had leaders, but they were not very good leaders. And in fact, you're going to see that God, when you read that passage, that God had some very harsh words to say to these shepherds because they weren't carrying out their responsibilities. And what these two passages help us understand is how important it is, that God sees how important it is to have leaders, to have shepherds for his people. and how important it is that the people have that. That's a need that they have, that we have, and that ultimately finds that fulfillment in Jesus himself. So as Jesus was looking at these people, these thousands of people that were coming to him there at that place, he basically saw them, as Moses saw the people wandering in the wilderness, because it was kind of an isolated location where they were. And that imagery of the people being out in the wilderness without a shepherd, without anyone to protect them, would provide them, guide for them. Jesus saw that. And of course, he was seeing more than the material physical part. He was seeing their spiritual need. And so he begins to address that. He starts to teach them. And of course, the people began to listen to him because the Bible says he taught with one like authority they had never heard before. And so he begins to teach them. And as he does that, then there arises this material physical need that comes about, because what happened was it grew late in the day, and the people, it was dinner time, and people, they didn't have anything to eat. Nobody had brought anything with them to eat, and there wasn't a Whataburger where you could run down and get a number one meal and get your Whataburger and your fries and your drink and everybody be good. That wasn't available there. And so this crisis, so to speak, arose. How were all of these people going to have the material physical need met that they were all experiencing? And as we get to that, on your teaching transcript in page 6, it asks a question, which I think is an important question for you to use to help your group begin to think about some of these things in a more of a why way than a what. And the question is this: what was the actual need that Jesus met? What did he actually give them? Now, obviously, what we're doing is probing a little bit deeper than just he gave them food to eat. What we're seeking to do is probe a little bit deeper in the fact of what need was he truly addressing. And someone may answer that and say, well, he gave himself. And as a teaching tip points out, if that's the answer that comes out of that, fantastic. And it's always good when somebody has the right answer. So just build on that and use that as a bridge to move on into further teaching of the text. And after you have someone read in Mark chapter 6, verse 35 through 44, there's another question here that's a good one to use. It says, what specifically did Jesus give the people here in this passage? Now, why this question is such a good one, and by the way, it's not a trick question. You're not trying to trick anybody into anything. And I just tell your class that, or your small group that. Say, hey, this isn't a trick question. It's just a obvious question. What did he give the people here in this passage? And obviously the answer was he gave them something to eat, and he provided for them in that way. And he met that need that they had. But as I said, we're going to probe a little bit deeper in that. Now, at this point, it would be good, too, to kind of look at what the disciples did. Because, see, this was a teaching time. This was a learning time, not only for this large group of people, but especially for his disciples. And they basically the ones that come to Jesus and say, look, hey, all these people are here. It's getting late in the day. They've got to go find dinner. Just send them out. Send them away. Tell them, hey, you got to scatter and go find you something to eat somewhere. And basically what they were doing is they were coming to Jesus, and they were trying to maybe slip out of some responsibility that they had by turning to Jesus and maybe letting him get them off the hook, so to speak, for providing food for all of these people. And Jesus, of course, turns it right back around on them and says, you give them food. And they go, oh, wait, no way can we do that. I mean, it would take more money than any of us have or any of us could get together. And certainly more than we got in our own disciple treasury account. So there's no way that's going to happen, Jesus. And as you think about that, then the question that on page 6 comes to mind. It's a good one. It said, why do you think Jesus told disciples to feed the people even though he knew it was impossible for them to do so? And of course, what Jesus was doing here, he was making the disciples think more than just that moment. He was getting them to look past just the what to the why. And one of the things that Jesus was doing here is helping the disciples understand, which is going to be an important lesson for them to learn, important one for us to learn, is that we can't do anything without Jesus. In fact, later on in the Gospel of John, John chapter 15, verse 5, Jesus was teaching, and he said there, you can do nothing apart from me. In other words, if we're not relying, trusting on Jesus because he is the one who gives us what we need, then we're not going to be able to accomplish or carry out. We're not going to be able spiritually to do anything without him. So he wanted those people to know, he wanted disciples to know, he wanted those people to understand that the real need all of them had was himself. And so he's basically setting them up. He set up these disciples up. He was setting these people up. And as I said before, this was all used by Jesus. This miracle was put together by Jesus to communicate a greater truth than just, I'm the one who can give you physical food. I'm the one who will give you what you need. And it was me. Jesus was saying it was me. I'm the only one that can do that there. Now, as I mentioned before, Mark doesn't really say anything about this being a sign. John tells us that in John chapter 6, and you'll want to go to that, bring people back to the Gospel of John and let them read those verses and kind of put that together with what we're studying in Mark here, because John tells us that this is a miraculous sign. And that term sign, as we know, is very important because what that tells us, it was more than just a miracle that was done. There was more than a what, but there was a why taking place behind it. And the people knew that Jesus had done something amazing. I mean, nobody feeds 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, but only Jesus. And so, it was an amazing thing in the what, but even more is the why behind it. And they were beginning, I'm not sure that they were beginning to understand that yet or were getting all that put together yet. But basically what Jesus is doing is helping them understand he is the one that they have been looking for, the Messiah. Now, in the bottom of page 6 on your teaching transcript, there's an Isaiah passage that you'll want to bring your group to and you'll want to have them read because it helps kind of tie some of this together. In that Isaiah passage, it talks about what the Messiah would do. One of the things that the Messiah would do, and one of the things it says that we would be able to recognize they would be able to recognize who the Messiah is, that he would sit and feast with his people on the mountain, and that's exactly what happened in this miracle. They sat and feasted with Jesus on the mountain, and by the way, they were able to feast with him is because he's the one who provided the feast. He's the one who provided the meal. He's the one who provided the food. And this would be a good time to take notice of that teaching tip there on page 7 about the term Messiah and how that is the Hebrew form of the familiar Greek term word Christ, and be a good tip to use there and good thing to communicate to your small group, helping them tie those two together in that way. And so don't miss that question that's there. There'll be a good interjection at this point in your class or your small group to help people begin to respond back to you. And as I said before, what we're trying to do is do more than the what, transfer information. We're wanting the people, more of a transfer of information. We want the people to begin to interact with that truth and begin to see how God can use it in their life and the transformation, the life change that can happen. And this is one of those questions that helps that. Because do you think the people were right to look to this passage of prophet about the coming Messiah? Did they get it right? Now, the people obviously had, they knew this passage, and they knew it talked about the Messiah, so they got that. They got that right. But what they missed was what the Messiah would be doing, who he really would be. Because you got to understand and remember that those people were looking for a Messiah kind of in the same image of Moses, a Messiah who would come in and deliver them from an oppressive people. And they've been under Roman oppression for many years. They were looking for a Messiah who would be maybe more of a national Messiah, one who would come in and deliver them from all the oppression of Rome and their other enemies, and put them back into a place where they as a nation were free from any of their oppressors, and maybe back in a place in the world where they were kind of the top dog on the world scene, so to speak. So they were looking for a national Messiah, but Jesus had come to them to meet remember, he has come to meet their greatest need. And they had a need, obviously, to be rescued or delivered from this Roman oppression. But the greater need was their own personal spiritual need. And that's the need that Jesus came to meet. And that's what that miracle was designed to help them understand. They kind of missed that part of it. That's why they kind of wanted to take him and make him their king right then, because they would see him to be the one who would lead them out of this Roman bondage, this Roman oppression. And they wanted to take him and make him that king. And obviously Jesus didn't come to be that king. He came to be the king of their individual lives. He came to be the king of their hearts. He came to rescue them from their sin. He came to deliver them from the oppression of sin and the oppression of religion and the oppression of death. And he's the one that could meet that need. He could give them, he could feed them what they were really starving for. Unfortunately, they didn't understand that. They didn't understand that their hunger was not for national redemption. Their hunger was for personal spiritual redemption. And so Jesus, it says, he withdrew from the people there, and because it was not the time nor that for him to be put in that place, nor was that what he came for. And look at the question on the bottom of page 7. It's a good question there for your class to wrestle with. Do you think we sometimes misunderstand what we actually need from Jesus? And how so? Because you see, just as those folks were looking for a physical, material need to be met by Jesus, I wonder if sometimes that's exactly what we do. We focus so much on our physical, material needs, not that those are not important, but we focus so much on those, and maybe sometimes we come to Jesus just looking for him to meet our physical, material need, and Jesus instead is saying, hey, I'm going to meet the greatest need you have, which is your spiritual hunger, not your physical hunger. And by the way, I'm the one who does that. I'm the bread of life. I'm the only one who can satisfy that need that you have. I'm the only one who can meet your need. It's interesting. You read the story of the feeding of 5,000. It says that everyone ate and they were satisfied. They were satisfied. Their physical hunger was satisfied. But I think that gives us some great insight into Jesus himself. Because when we recognize he is the one we need and that he has given himself to us and we embrace him by faith, then we are truly satisfied there. And so as you wrap that up, that question at the end on page 8 of your teaching transcript, as you're wrapping up teaching the text, it's a good one. It says, if all you had in this life literally was Jesus, how would your story end? In other words, would you be satisfied in life? Would you have all that you need? Or would you maybe be like some of the folks of that day, still looking for some other things, still thinking some of those other things could satisfy you? Not that we don't need those, and we have to have those, and obviously those are things that contribute to life. But the reality is that you could have all of those things. You could have all the fish and the bread that you wanted for a lifetime. But if you didn't have Jesus, you never would be satisfied. And as in the teaching transcript, the last sentence says, good summary. It says, remember, Jesus is both our great shepherd and our bread of life. He really is what we need most in life. And he has given us himself. And that's kind of what we talked about in last week's lesson in detail there. Well, after you finish teaching the text, obviously there's a very, very important part of this. And in your small group, your on-campus group, as with any time, this is really kind of in a way where the rubber meets the road, because this is the application time. This is the time where we take that information, move into application. We take just getting the facts and begin to let God use them to change our lives. And so this is a key moment, and don't rush past that, or don't rush through it. Hopefully you'll have enough time left at the end of your small group to let your group break up into these clusters of 4 to 5 people, and begin to work their way through the handout which you have there for them. You should have a small group handout that you'll be giving out to them, each one of them. And as they gather in their small group clusters, encourage them to wrestle through these things. Encourage them to take that time and work through those 3 applicational points there. The first one is writing down 2 or 3 surface needs that they know someone else has. And this needs to be some things that they're really aware of, not just kind of a hypothetical type of thing or something they're just thinking about in general, but maybe someone they know, someone in their own family, their circle of friends, some needs that they have. And then discuss, application point number 2 says, discuss this together. How can meeting that need serve as an opportunity for that person to see the reality that Jesus is their greatest need as well as their provider? In other words, how is that need going to be met? How would that be an opportunity for them to see the reality of God in their lives and talk about that together? And by the way, it may just be that in that discussion, some of them would say, you know what, maybe God wants to use me to help meet that need, and then help them understand the reason that happens is because God is in my life. And that may become a great opportunity for them to help point that person to God. And then the third application point is reading those 3 passages together. And as they read those 3 passages, kind of writing down some insights. One insight would be how God meets our needs. How do we respond when he does that? And then how can God be seen even when someone around us is in need? And those passages would give you some really good things to give the small group members some really good things to wrestle with in that regards and to think through, and then to share with each other. And by the way, one of the great benefits of breaking into the smaller clusters of 4 or 5 people is that they're able to discuss these together and share with one another. And oftentimes, as they interact together in those small group clusters, some of that truth that you've been learning, that you've been teaching, is going to be driven home in a more personal way than it would in your larger group setting. All right? I know it's going to be a great study for you. And as you wind it up that day, look at page 10 of your teaching transcript, and it gives you a great way to conclude that and a great thing to kind of wrap it all up, tie those loose ends together. And then I would encourage you to use that scripture verse at the very end. If you're looking for a way to say, hey, you're dismissed, here's a great way to do that. Just have everybody read together or quote together Psalm 23:1. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. Have a great study Sunday, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Bye.
Hallelujah.